Well, this story is for all of us. All of us. We all are children of God. Just remember that. Well, first of all, I want to say good morning to you. And this is scary to me, too. I want to show you, it says it's going to be kind of long, so everybody hang on tight. But first of all, I'm going to show you a picture. If I can get it up here. Yes, that's a picture of me when I was little. Okay, I'll get myself situated here. I'll try not to be too long, but you all know how much I'm a big talky person. First, as I did, I showed you the picture, and it was me when I was a little girl, and when I went to school. The church and the first church that I knew was over along the freeway. We used to have a church over there. They used to have steps that went, long steps that came down the front, and when they put the freeway in, they took the steps away. Right next door is a school too, and that's where I went to school when I first started going to school. And there was a lot of us kids, a lot of us. There's an older lady that was our teacher during that time. Her name was Miss Striplin. She ended up living, I think it was 100 until she was 102, 103 years old. But she was old at the time. The kids used to make fun of her, especially some of the boys. But you know how some people are. But anyway, then we got this church here. But first we had a school that's still over there. We sold it years ago. It's over on the other side of town. And we went to school there. They had a big gymnasium type place. And there was a Dorcas there. And we had 2 schoolrooms and everything. They were building the schoolrooms when we first went there. So we had to be back in a little tiny room, and we had the desk we had to climb over the desk to get in our chairs. But anyway, I'm sure most of you don't remember that, but some of you might remember. Most of you are not here now. But anyway, and then finally we had church there too until this church was made. And then we finally got to come to this church. And I was among the first that was baptized in this church, and my sister was the first one married in this church. She was 8 years older than I am. And so this brings a lot of history to me to look back on this. I understand there was another church before the one by the freeway. There was one other, but that was before my time. Okay, now, the other day I was talking to one of the girls that used to be here. She was a little bit older than I am. She had a brother and sister. Some of you knew her, Elaine Evans, and her married name was Crouch. And so we were talking. She says she just going to take a few minutes, but we ended up talking about 2.5 hours. So we was remembering things. Do you remember so-and-so at this school? And you remember that pastor? And it was really interesting to listen to and talk to different ones, and remember when we were little kids and some dumb things we used to do. We had a Pathfinders during that time too. We had several Pathfinder leaders, but we don't have that now, do we? Anyway, there used to be I went to an academy. I went to Monterey Bay Academy. But a lot of the kids that went to school here went down to Fresno Academy. But before they have the academy they have out there now, they had a school, an academy, and a church right across from the zoo down in Fresno. I assume most of you know where the zoo is. And it was right across the street, and they say the buildings are still there, but used for something else. There's somebody here that went to school at the same time during that time. They went to school there, but I won't say who it is. That's a secret. So anyway, then when I was a child here, there was many, many people coming to church here. Many, many, many people. There was so many, many. There was lots of children in the Sabbath school room, and there were at least maybe 3 to 4 classes for the adults in here. There would be one in the back, one up here. We had one up in the choir loft. So we had a lot of people used to come here. And in later years, when I grew up, I used to teach back in the school, in the Sabbath school. And I would have from 10 to many more that would come to church and go to Sabbath school and everything. And so we had a lot of people come. And like I said, there was the Pathfinders. We used to go camping and everything like the Pathfinders that Dr. Bowman used to have here. We used to go out and and then the people, the older folks, when they started dying, or if they got too old and they couldn't stay by themselves and they went to live with their children in another place, things started to change here. But I do look now and my heart is sad. And I'm sure Jesus is sad too. But in the Bible tells us in the later days that things will not be the same in this world, that we will lose people in our churches. And sometimes the churches there won't be anybody there, so we have to go to a different church, an Adventist church, you know. And so not all that used to come here, some of the children, some of the other people, when they left this church and they moved away, not all of them stayed going to church, and that makes it sadder. They don't go to church anymore. Sometimes you wonder, it's kind of like what we're talking today, we wonder, how come? But everybody has their choices to make, and they see things differently. The Bible tells us that happened in the Bible stories too, you know, when Israelites they would have a king like King David and things, and they stayed close and they worshiped on Sabbath and they loved God, and then something would happen and they would go off and be bad. And God would finally had to let them go into captivity because they would not obey. But as long as they obeyed and followed Jesus, then everything went well. But remember, I'm going to tell you something. God has not promised that because we go to church here on Sabbath and that we believe Jesus and follow him, he does not promise that we'll never have problems, because we all have to go through things. It's called a testing time. Part of it is that he wants to know, how much do you really love Jesus? How much do you really care? Or are you just coming because mom and dad had you come? Or maybe some friend's there and I want to go with my friend. But we have to make sure we're going because we love God. And then sorry, I don't write too good when I'm in a hurry. Okay. The Bible tells us another story. Oh, let me read this part. It says, the Bible tells us that it happened in the Old Testament. That is one reason why Jesus had to come to this earth, to show us how much that God the Father and how much He loves us. So much that God sent His Son, Jesus, to come to this earth to teach us how much He loves us. And He wants each one of us to love each other too. It says Jesus would talk to the people and they would hurry to follow Him and hear Him. And there was so many stories in the Bible. I want to ask you, do you remember the story about how Jesus had over 5,000 people on the hill listening to Him? Do you remember the rest of what I'm going to ask you?
Maybe.
Was that?
Maybe.
Maybe, huh? Anyway, what do you think?
Maybe just a little bit. I don't know.
So you don't know either? What you think?
I don't know.
I bet your daddy knows.
Well, I mean, I know what happens in the story. What are you asking us?
I'm asking you if you know the story. And how they were all out on the hill, all these 5,000 people. They don't always mention the boys and girls and the mommies, but there was 5,000 men out there, and they had all the men, or the women, and the children out there too. They were hungry. Anyway, disciples told Jesus, after he'd been talking to them for a long time, let me show you a picture. You remember now?
Yeah, I remember. Oh, yeah, where they have that fish and bread they gave them to
Okay, now you know what I'm saying. It says because he was, the disciples were telling him, he says, all the people are getting tired now. Send them out to go eat. Go out and go to the villages, either go home or go to the villages and get something to eat. And what did Jesus say to him? Do you remember? What did Jesus say? He told the disciples, you feed them. And the disciples said, oh, Master, how could I go and feed them? We wouldn't even have money enough to buy for all these people. But there was a little boy who had taken a lunch with him to eat, but had forgotten to eat it because he was listening to what Jesus was saying. He was close enough that he could hear what Jesus was talking to the disciples about, and he thought, Jesus, he must be hungry. And he told one of the disciples, I think it was Andrew, he says, tell Jesus that he can have my lunch. So Andrew goes up to Jesus and he says, there's a little boy out here with a little lunch. But he says he's only got 2 little fish and 4 little barley cakes. Was there 5? Well, I guess the book's wrong. It just shows you there's nothing perfect. But anyway, so Jesus took the loaves of bread, and there's baskets. And what did he do then?
He filled them up with food.
Well, how did he do it first?
He blessed the food to make it more.
That's right. And then what did he do?
And then he gave it to the people. And then they ate it, and when they ate it, there was a bunch of food.
Well, first of all, what did he do? He took the fish and started breaking them, huh? And the bread, and you think, wow, that's not very much. And over, and the basket would be full, and someone would go out, the disciple would go out, sit down, everybody, and he'd pass it around, and people were eating, and how much was left afterwards?
A lot.
Do you remember how much?
Let's start with a 5.
You know?
I forget.
There was 12 baskets full left over.
What?
Yeah, 12 big baskets full left over. And that's from 2 small fish and 5 barley loaves. Now,
Did he take little bitty pieces?
well, I imagine Jesus was pretty, gave a lot because he was feeding all these people. Now, they don't really say what they do with these baskets of fish and things that are left over. What do you think they did with those fish and that bread?
They ate it?
No, after everybody already ate and they picked up what was left, what do you think they did with it? Do you think they just threw it away?
Or saved it?
I want to think, I don't know, do you know? I kind of figure they probably took it to other people. People got some and took it maybe to some of the homeless like we have. There's some that didn't. And you never know, they could have taken it and put it down for the lepers, the people that couldn't come in the city. What do you think?
On Thanksgiving, my mom is going to feed the homeless people.
Well, that's good. That's very nice. Are you going to help?
No.
No? Anyway, what the Bible story book tells us, and I believe it, is God knew this little boy would be there. Jesus knew this little boy would be there with his little fishies. And he waited to see if the little boy would share. And the little boy shared. And that's the way with each one of us,
Like me, I share, but if it's money, I don't share. I don't share money.
Oh dear.
Well, but it tells us in the Bible that God knows each one of us, kind of like we were talking in the Sabbath school lesson. He knows each one of us before we even came to live here on this earth. He knew what we would do and what we wouldn't do. And he knows what you will do for him. And so he knew that you would live with your grandma part of the time.
Yeah.
And then you see your other grandma sometimes.
Yeah.
And you live with your mommy and daddy, don't you? Every one of us, he knows. He knew that Irene Moon would be a missionary to Africa. And he knew that Mr. Dreyer would be a farmer. And he knew that some of the others would be nurses and doctors. And someone a truck driver. But
My mom is a nurse.
see, he knows that she would be that. And so I have a little thing on top of my refrigerator that says, grow where God has planted you. He has you just where he wants you right now. And that we must keep praying to God, keep coming to church, keep sharing and helping and loving others. In other words, we want to be like Jesus. And remember, everything you do, am I being like Jesus? Would Jesus do this? Would Jesus do that? Because he went around the world doing wonderful things, healing people, and most of all, he died for us.
And wherever we go, Jesus has our heart. And when he has our heart, he's never going to let our heart go. He always loves us.
That's true. And don't let the devil take it away from you. Just hang on tight and say, help me, Jesus. Help me to stay close to you.
You gonna be a preacher when you grow up?
Anyway, there's a little song which the pianist doesn't know. She might, but I don't. Where is it at? Anyway, there's a little song that I started going out in the early morning and watching the sun come up. And it came to my mind. It's called, I Want to Be Like Jesus. Some of you might remember that song. I'm going to try singing it to you. Don't anybody laugh at me. But it goes like this. I want to be ready when Jesus comes. I want to be ready when Jesus comes. Earth pleasures are few, but I'm longing for you. Dear Lord, keep me till Jesus comes. Is that your prayer? That he will keep you till Jesus comes? Now let's have a little prayer. One of you like to pray? Okay.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and we thank you for your love. We just hope those homeless people will get some money and have a house to do. And I wish you could help those people that are having hard times, help them be well and all. And those people who aren't come and are sick, just make them well, Jesus. Jesus, dear God, we love you. Amen.
Thank you.